In this video, we're going to take a look at working with VDB files in Octane for Cinema 4D. And for this video, I'm using the muscleship_2.c4d scene. So this has sort of our muscle hot rod spaceship, and you can see we have a plume of kind of a steamy smoke coming up from the spaceship, and this is created using a VDB file that was imported. So you can learn all about VDBs at openvdb.org. It describes the file format as well as how to create it. And also under the download section, it has examples that you can download and import into your scene. And there are also examples of VDBs included with the project files for this video. In addition to importing VDB files, you can also use programs such as Houdini to create VDBs. And in fact, the volume that you see here was created as a VDB sequence using Houdini. But once you create the VDB, it's very easy to import and edit within Octane for Cinema 4D. And that's what we're going to take a look at in this video. So in the scene, I'm going to select the VDB volume and delete it just so we can kind of start from scratch. I'll zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to go to Octane, Octane Dialog, and I'll choose Objects, Octane VDB Volume. This adds the node to the scene. Let's close this for a second. And you can see that it comes in kind of this rectangular volume representation. So let's move this. Let's just put it off to the side here next to the spaceship or in front of the spaceship. And let's choose Octane Live Viewer Window. Let's do a quick render here. So the first thing that we notice is we don't notice anything. We're not seeing much of a volume here. We have to link the VDB to the file itself. So I'll click on this button next to the file field here under VDB. And I'm going to choose New Steam 30. So these are VDB files that were created for this project. You can see there's 4 of them. So I'll choose this. And we're still not seeing a whole lot of a change here. So let's take a look at the coordinate section here. And I'm going to raise the scale here to 100 by 100 by 100. And you can see now, we see our volume. So if you're not seeing something when you're first bringing it into the scene, first thing you want to check is the scale of the VDB itself. The next thing you want to do is go to the VDB. And if we take a look here, the import units is set to meters, so that's okay for this scene. We also have grid mapping. So this is mapping essentially these attributes, absorption, scatter, and emission, to attributes that are encoded within the VDB itself. So when this VDB was created in Houdini, it only output 2 options, density and temperature, but you'll have VDB files that have more options. So you can map absorption, scatter, and emission to these options if you want, and also change the scale. I like to leave the scale at 1 and do more of the adjustments, fine-tuning of the look of the volume using the volume medium. So let's go over to the medium section, and I'm going to click on volume medium. And the first thing I want to do is adjust the density. So if I lower the density, you get more of a wispy kind of fog-like look. As I increase the density, I get something that's obviously much more thicker and opaque. Below density, we have volume step length. You can kind of think of this as the quality of the volume render. The lower the setting, the higher the quality, but the longer it will take to render. So if I bring it down, you can see it's taking a bit longer to render. If I bring it up, it should take less time. That's a little bit too much. Let's set this to like 16. I like to start with a value of like something like 16, and then as I tune the settings, I'll start to bring this down when I really want to kind of fine tune the look of it. But 16 is good for a start, for at least this volume anyways. Now let's take a look at absorption and scattering. So these determine the colors that you'll see in the volume. If I click on the color swatch here for absorption, I'm going to set this to HSV for hue, saturation, and value. And I'll bring up the saturation, and let's choose like a green color. and bring up the value. As you can see, we get this kind of greenish smoke. Now you notice that invert absorption is turned on. So what this green color means is that the volume is absorbing the green wavelength of light. So you'd expect that if it's being absorbed, then we wouldn't see green, we would see the opposite of green. So if I turn invert absorption off, we see the complementary color to green, which is this purple. So invert absorption just makes the entire process a bit more intuitive because it's kind of hard to pick a color by picking its opposite. You can turn on invert absorption and then use this as kind of a more intuitive way to adjust the color. Let's set this back to, say, a darker gray, something like that. And then we'll go back and take a look at scattering. So I'll click on scattering and let's choose a color. I'm going to bring up the saturation and the value so we get this reddish color. So it's scattering red light within the volume. And if we take a look at the scattering phase, this determines if it's scattered more towards the front or the back of the volume. Negative values mean we get more of a backscattering effect, and this is even more noticeable if we have a strong backlight on the volume. If I bring this to a positive value, we get more forward scattering. So you can see it does have a dramatic effect on the overall look of the volume. I'm going to bring it to a value of something like 0.36 or something like that. And let's set scattering back to a desaturated color. Maybe, oh, sorry, let's bring up the value, but let's bring the saturation down. So we get more of a light gray, kind of a smoky color there. And then we can also use the ramp feature to add a gradient to these colors. So if I click on this arrow right here and choose C4D, I want to choose volume gradient. Then I'll click on this button so that I can actually edit the gradient. So let's make this black color, more of a reddish light red. You can see it encompasses the entire volume there. So I'm going to add another color marker here to make this black. And then let's go over here and I'll make this green. It won't be pretty, but it should illustrate kind of how the gradients work. So I can adjust the position of the colors. I can also adjust the max value. So you can see if I bring it down, we're going to see more of those colors going to be apparent. Let's bring it to like 1.6. So it's looking a little bit noxious with the pink and the green there, but you get the idea of how it works. And we can choose between linear or radial gradients. The difference might not be that big depending on the volume between linear and radial. Let's go back up here and I'm going to clear this ramp. And let's take a look at emission. So emission, as you might expect, is going to add an emissive quality to the volume. So click on this arrow right here. I'll choose C4D Octane and let's do black body emission. So you can see now our volume is bright and is casting light into the scene. So click on the black body emission button. Let's turn on surface brightness so that the scale of the volume affects the overall brightness. And let's bring down the power to say something like 12 or something like that. It's looking a little supernatural there, but that's kind of cool. So let's go back up here, and under emission we can also add a ramp. Same thing as we did before. C4D Octane will do volume gradient, and I'll click on the volume gradient button, and let's add on this side of the gradient, we'll add a reddish color, a deep red. And then over here, we'll add a pale yellow. And then over here, we'll add an orange. And then let's adjust the max value. If we bring this down, let's see if we're not seeing a whole lot of difference here. Let's bring max value down a little bit. Go back up to emission, click on black body emission, and let's bring up the power here. So I played a little bit with the colors here on the gradient map as well as the max value. Also adjusted things such as the density and the volume step length, add a little bit of a color to the absorption, and just kind of play around with some of these settings. On the black body emission, and the power set to 50. Let's try 25. So it's not quite so overpowering. Also adjusting the scattering phase to kind of fine tune the look. And you can go on just adjusting these settings to kind of custom design the look that you need. If you are using a sequence, what you want to do is go back to the VDB section here. You want to make sure that when you write out your sequence, it's in a format that has the file name .frame number .vdb, and then you can set your start and end frame using these options right here. If you're just using a single file, then you want to set start and end to 0. So that's the basics of working with VDB files in Octane for Cinema 4D.